Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Friday, July 1st installment of the Silicon Insider, the only uncensored look at life and business in the Valley. My name is Mike Malone, and I'm here with special contributor Scott Budman, technology reporter for NBC Bay Area. Our producer is Jordan Henderson. Our East Coast correspondent is Bob Grove, and our host, as always, is the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Okay, well, quite a week, Scott, on the national scene and in the Valley. So, I hesitate touching this third rail, but I think we should at least address it. The Supreme Court came down and overturned Roe and threw the decision on abortions out to the state. Now, I'm not going to get into all of that, but I do want to get into its impact upon technology companies and the use of technology, because as this moves out to the states and is now a jump ball topic in all of 50 states, we're going to see a lot of companies getting involved. We're going to see a lot of people using social networks and the internet to make their case. I mean, this is going to be quite a year or two of dealing with this. Lawsuits being put together via crowdsourcing. I mean, there's a lot of things that could be going on right now in the next few months,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is a decision that, for many of us is something we'd never seen in our lifetime, not having Roe versus Wade. But if you also think about what's changed in the last 50 years, the privacy and Roe versus Wade was built on a foundation of privacy. And that has really changed in the modern tech, call it the surveillance state. And one of the concerns that's a major concern is how states that are outlawing abortion will track people and find people who are using apps for this, who are, taking Uber rides and Lyft rides to, clinics or even out of state. I mean, the idea that we are being tracked by apps and our devices is not new, but it takes on a sinister connotation, I think an extra sinister connotation when you think about how states might end up using this. And that puts pressure, like you say, on the tech companies, some of which are responding and saying, hey, we're going to pay if you need care. We're going to pay even to take you to another state if you need care. We really respect your rights. But what about their right to privacy? What will these companies do, given that their technology could be used in this very dystopian way to track people now that Roe has been overturned?
It's interesting. Back when I was teaching law school 25 years ago, it was kind of the talk about Roe then was that the Supreme Court had found a right to privacy to justify Roe. It wasn't in the Constitution, and they had found it. And it's interesting, a quarter century later, now this notion of privacy we become used to is going to be challenged in a lot of interesting and dangerous ways.
Right, because now it can. Even 25 years ago, we weren't so susceptible to tracking and our privacy. Obviously, our privacy was a big thing, but just what has happened in the last decade or two is just amazing in terms of how much we can be tracked. And that brings a new danger and I think a new cloud to the Roe decision. And people are starting to ask the tech companies, and I think this is very legitimate, like, okay, Apple and Starbucks and Tesla and, now Oracle, you'll pay for the healthcare and that's great. What about the technologies that are being used to track us and to track our movements? It's very dystopian. And I think that's something that these companies have to answer for, not just, hey, advertisers can track you and you might get that, ad for the rowing machine just because you looked up a rowing machine once. That's harmless compared to what people are going to be dealing with in the near future, I think.
It's interesting. Young people have been pretty cavalier about privacy, the last decade or so. Yeah, we know they're tracking us, they're doing that. But now they're getting a glimpse of what I think older people were warning about, that, privacy, there are certain things in privacy that really do matter. Right. I see all sorts of messes coming out of this. I see another one. If companies are going to pay to give employees time off to go to another state, pay for the abortion and all of that, I can see parents, new mothers to say, well, what have you guys been doing for us the last, X number of years? Do we get some kind of special treatment? I can see a class action suit on that one. I can see a whole bunch of class action suits coming out of this thing, and then fights in every single state. I mean, this could be the focus of our attention for a very long time.
Right. I mean, imagine you're a young person in one of these companies, and that is an HR request or a time off request that has got to be extremely uncomfortable. And again, your privacy is at risk there.
You're announcing it to your boss.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No more going to visit your older sister in a different state. That was the way the world worked in 1945. Now it's, you got to announce to your HR person. That's why you need to take some time off, and you need money to do it. Yeah, no, there's going to be no privacy in regards to this. Okay, well, we're going to be covering this one for a long time. Okay, crypto. We have crypto exchange FTX is working on a deal to buy lender BlockFi for $25 million. I actually did a double take when you sent me that, because I thought, oh, Scott forgot to put the B in there. He had an M. But this BlockFi was valued at $4.8 billion the last time I looked. Okay. 25 million. My, how the mighty have fallen.
Well, and right. And apparently BlockFi is now got some other suitors. The price is just, I guess, too good to pass up. But this is sort of what we saw with the Celsius exchange and with some of these prices that have just all but gone down to zero. What you get for an exchange, even if you can pick it up for 25 million, I mean, literally, like, that's 1% of its recent valuation. We've seen stocks fall quite a bit, but to lose 99% of your value, that's not a down round. That's value just disappearing. Nobody makes any money on this sale, right? Because so it's just a lose-lose situation to even keep this thing going. And I guess the goal is, hey, this might make a comeback. Crypto has come back before. The valuation of some of these coins, the legitimate ones like Bitcoin, are still high, even if they're nowhere near where they were. But I bring this up just as an example of the crashing prices. And I really wonder what happens to some of these Bitcoin whales. We brought this up before, but the Michael Saylors and the Elon Musks, they've been buying in at much, much higher valuations with really top dollars. This is not just, average Joes like us putting a little bit of mad money into crypto to see where it goes. This is significant company and CEO investment. And I'm really watching those guys to see what they eventually have to do. Because in the case of Musk, he's still trying to buy Twitter. In the case of Saylor, he's still running MicroStrategy. These are big companies, and people, I mean, the margin calls on these things have got to be crazy.
Yeah, but when you lose this much on it, you got to stay in now. There's, you're not getting anything for selling off.
Right.
This isn't bailing out. You just got to hang on and hope one day it comes back. It's got to be a tough time. Micron, this was a very interesting bit of news. Speaking of the semiconductor world, the chip maker, the memory chip maker, Micron, I guess they're the biggest one in the United States now, which is, it's telling about how far we've come out of memory here in the US. Right. Micron predicts meaningfully lower. That's an interesting phrase I've never really heard at a stock announcement, but meaningfully lower than expected smartphone sales for the rest of 22. That just painted a very dark brush on that entire industry, citing weak consumer demand. Also a 10% drop in PC sales. So PCs are down, smartphones are going to be way down. And Micron got hammered in their stock after that announcement. Got a note from Grove saying, is Micron the semiconductor canary in the coal mine? Is this a glimpse of what's coming really soon? I mean, that's a really downbeat forecast.
Well, my question would be this. First of all, given that it came from Micron, I mean, weren't we just hearing from the computer chip makers about such a shortage that they can't possibly keep up with demand, and that was hurting their bottom lines because of all these supply chain concerns and all the demands of the EVs and everything like that need chips? So has it switched to, hey, we're not going to be selling as many chips as we can because inflation is cutting into the buying power of the consumer. So we might see fewer phones, fewer PCs. Does that mean we're out of the chip shortage? And if so, okay, maybe fewer PC sales, But does that mean we're finally going to get to build those F-150s and, those other EVs that need chips so badly?
Well, I don't think we have enough detail yet. I mean, because this is the key word here is memory chips.
Good
Now,
point.
memory chips have always been, the measure by which everything is done. But I think the shortage is in processors. You need that engine computer for the F-150, especially if you're going to buy a Lightning that's got all the electrical stuff you got to manage. But memory, you get right down to the very top of the food chain, memory chips. And so I wonder if Grove is right that we're going to start seeing it starting to hit elsewhere. So maybe we will be able to better F-150s, but nobody's going to buy one.
Right. I mean, that's the downside, obviously, to the consumer of inflationary times. I've seen out in the wild a lot of new Androids, a lot of iPhone 13s. So people have been buying them. But you're right. There is such a question mark over the rest of as you and I speak, we're now at exactly the halfway point of 2022. There's such a question mark heading over the rest of the year, largely because of price pressures. And are people going to be able to, in an era of where we sit, $7 gas and $17 deli sandwiches, there's so much pressure right now on just the average everyday stuff we do and buy that's really going to cut into our bottom lines because, as we know, inflation has risen faster than any of our paychecks.
Did you notice the discussion this week that the semiconductor support bill is stalled in Congress, and now Europe is stepping in, the EU is stepping in and offering, well, we'll help you build your semiconductor fabs over here. That's kind of chilling too. It's a good, smart move by Europe, but
right.
A really stupid move by the United States.
I was waiting for
vulnerability. Why amplify our vulnerability for the next 10 years?
Right, because you're right. With anything chip related, it's a long-term play. I was waiting for the EU. I didn't know this. This is interesting that you bring that up. I was waiting for the EU post-Brexit to say, hey, by the way, we can still take care of some of this business. It just won't be where it used to be. Yeah. And I wonder how much traction they'll get on that during a tough time for manufacturing.
Right. In that same note from Bob from Grove, he pointed out something I haven't noticed this. We haven't talked about IPOs a lot lately.
There's a reason for that.
We're talking about them every week last year or the year before. The IPO market for Q2 is down 90%.
Well, look, this is not a gradual market. It never has been. I mean, you're either in boom times or bust times. And the reason is not just because the economy is boom or bust. It's because VCs are either feeling confident or nervous. And in pretty short fashion, VCs have started to feel nervous, and they're holding the money to their chest right now, which makes sense if you look at the valuations of even strong companies. I mean, Wall Street is just beating everybody up right now. Why would you go public in this market? And I think, the only healthy thing that comes out of this sort of thing is caution. And then eventually, when things turn around, the VCs have that money that's been sitting on the sidelines. But why would you jump in right now to a market that's punishing everybody, no matter how well you're doing?
And I don't even know if you could go public in a market like this. I think if you made the announcement, you might have to retract it. But what I always remember is when the IPOs slump, you feel the consequences 3 to 4 years later. Immediately you have more available cash, and the employees are running around with more disposable income. But you don't see the great new companies that might have been born during periods like this. And so we tend to get slumps in exciting companies as we come out into the next boom because of this shortfall.
I agree, but I mean, look at the economy right now. I mean, like you say, you probably couldn't even go public unless you're maybe a TikTok that
I'm
just
not even sure you get money as a startup right now from the VCs.
Right. I mean, they are nervous, and look around you. It's understandable. The only good thing that comes from this, I think, is, I've always felt and have seen that the housing market in the Bay Area rises and falls on stock option valuations. And if those stock options are worth much less and there are no IPOs, there are fewer people coming up with, I don't know, $600,000 as a down payment or something. And so maybe that continues to cool what has been a gradually cooling housing market here.
We haven't heard from is Mark Andreessen. I mean, Mark came out a few years ago and said, I'm buckling down for a nuclear winter. And I haven't read any posts by him or anything saying we're heading into another, nuclear winter in Silicon Valley. I'm curious if he's still optimistic for some reason, or he'll think we have a soft landing. He's been very good about making predictions in the past. And he's been quite quiet, I think.
It's true. I mean, I've thought of him in the last several years as a VC more than anything else. You
Sure.
look at A16Z, his company, which has made some recent moves into, say, cryptocurrency. But again, his silence, his sort of caution, if you will, makes sense because he is one of now our leading VCs.
We'll have to look into what Andreessen Horowitz has been doing in the last few months. I think that might be a clue as well.
I agree.
Your note said, still waiting for the tech layoffs with semiconductor demand slowing. NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel had their price targets cut by market makers. That's not a good sign, especially NVIDIA. NVIDIA has been indestructible the last few years.
Right. And they've been hiring a lot and growing a lot and getting a whole lot of people very wealthy. The bigger they come, I mean, their market cap now dwarfs AMD and Intel. So they're now sort of the leader that you'd watch, the canary in the coal mine, if you will. And I think, they've really made some good moves to broaden their offerings. And so they're no longer anything near a one-trick pony if they ever were. But everything's getting hit right now. And they supply chips and boards and technology to a whole bunch of companies that are all probably pulling in the reins. And that's why I think these chip companies are getting their valuations hit. And but really everybody is. I just don't see all that much strength in the tech industry right now. I think right now it's sort of batten down the hatches and hope they don't lose too many people, because even 9 months ago, boy, the employment numbers were as strong as ever and the stock prices were as high as ever. And then things just tumbled and they're all taking tech down with it.
It'll be interesting to see how many of the gains they made a year ago they're able to keep.
Not many we've seen. I mean, look at NVIDIA, look at Netflix, look at
Facebook. I mean, even employees, they all plumped up with brand new employees and all that. How many of them are they going to lay off, and how many actually do they keep? Does the Valley kind of grow during this period? It's done it before in downturns, but just grows slightly or just holds its own.
Yeah, I mean, Facebook, Meta made an interesting announcement saying, we're really going to cut our hiring when it comes to, engineers for the metaverse. But they're still adding people. They're just adding fewer. And I thought, wow, I mean, this is a company that, as admitted, their $10 billion just kind of went out the window. More than 50% of its stock value went out the window, and they're still adding engineers. And so we know they have a lot of cash, but
see the other comment by Zuckerberg where he said, we're going to raise our performance standards to get rid of people who aren't performing as well as they should. And I thought that's the kind of announcement you would never hear when Sandberg was there. She at least knew the value of PR. I'm sensing we're entering into the Zuckerberg CEO era now. He's made his first step in. It's going to be a very different company under him.
Well, I think we've been in the Zuckerberg CEO era. I think what you maybe mean is the unchecked Zuckerberg CEO era.
There you go. I think that's the appropriate I think we know we're going to find out how much she constrained him from being like this.
Right. And how important she was for that company's bottom line when it comes to sales. I mean, would $10 billion fly out the window with nothing coming back in yet? That's crazy money right there, especially heading into a recession. And we know companies come out of recessions, building happens during recessions, but that's a lot of money towards something that I still haven't seen as a proven, place to gather, this metaverse.
So far, it's been like a $10 billion trademark.
Yeah. What did you get for $10 billion?
Yeah.
We lost half our valuation and we got a new name. Great.
Yeah. Okay, some small news. One cool one, the FCC has just greenlighted Starlink services on moving cars, boats, and planes. That's kind of exciting. The idea, I mean, people I know who've used Starlink swear by it. And obviously it did a hell of a job, or doing a hell of a job in the Ukraine. If you can in your boat on a lake, pick up internet. That'd be pretty cool. Same thing in a private plane, in a car. I mean, I drive to Oregon on a regular basis. Every time you get in the Trinity Alps, unless you got satellite XM, you're talking to yourself for about an hour and a half. So to be able to have that is interesting. I mean, I think this is one of those announcements that doesn't seem that big at the time, but I think it'll become a central part of our lives in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, that was my first thought is this now a competitor to Sirius XM? And I don't know that area, that industry enough to know, but it sounds like what you're saying and what Musk was saying is that they may be a competitor in that area to, how you drive or boat or fly or whatever. And, there's even been talk of him spinning that off from SpaceX. So, it in a fairly short period of time has really upped its game and gotten a lot of press.
Yeah. Other items, short items. Airbnb is now permanently banning parties. And we know what caused that. I mean, it took place about 10 blocks from my house. I drive by that neighborhood every day. Somebody rented an Airbnb, put on a big house party in this neighborhood just off of Wolf Road, and somebody got shot and killed. I literally went by the yellow tape after it happened. I think that's a smart thing for Airbnb to do. I mean, there's so much liability. I don't know how they're going to stop parties, that I think people are going to still rent places, as if they're renting it to a residence for a while, and then they're going to put on a big party. But
I mean, you can sort of see, I've been checking out Airbnbs and that sort of thing lately, and you can see even some of the owners are taking this to heart. They're saying, hey, this is a place for 2 people at a time, and I think that's almost, sort of cover yourself, for any liability. And so Airbnb is probably telling the owners, like, lay that out there so that it's known, almost like, hey, you have to take out the trash. And if you don't, we're going to fine you. Hey, this is for 2 people only or 1 family only, and expect more of that.
Put it in the contract.
Right.
Yeah. So you have some legal protection. Okay. Jordan sent this one. I think we both missed it. The anniversary of the first iPhone retail release. Now, once I heard about it, I was reminded very vividly because a venture capitalist down the street from me that I knew real well, he called my house and asked to talk to my oldest son, Tad. And he wanted to hire Tad and a friend to go camp out at the Apple store. I guess, was it the Apple store or was it a phone store?
No, the Apple store.
Apple store.
Yeah.
And Tad and his buddy, Zach, who's now a doctor, they Eagle Scouts. So they took their Boy Scout tent, set up on the sidewalk in the line 36 hours ahead of time. And they were right there at the front when they opened the doors. And I had to drive down because neither one of them was old enough to actually do it. So I had to drive down, fight my way through the crowd at the door, join these 2 guys, 2 teenagers at the door inside at the counter and sign for the thing. And I got to see it. And I thought, interesting, but how do you make a phone call? I understood everything else, but the phone part confused me, as Apple products often do. But I was right there. I remember the craziness to get that phone.
Yeah, I remember it too. And it's funny when I saw the anniversary of the first iPhone that went on sale, because I remember being at the event where Jobs, introduced it. But when it went on sale, my first thought was to exactly what your son was doing. What Tad was doing was all those people in line. And, your son may have birthed TaskRabbit, and all those other sort of we'll do the task for you kind of industries. But I remember that. And it reminded me, when I went to college, I went to UCLA in Los Angeles, and movies were everything. And I hadn't seen, I'm a little young to stand in line for, say, Jaws or the early blockbusters. But you hear like, oh, these movies have people stand in line forever. And I remember in Westwood standing in line forever. And there were always fraternities who would get the pledges to stand in line for them just to see like the new James Bond movie or whatever. And yet what I was touched by with the Apple thing covering that day and that night was not just, the good people like your son taking a few bucks to say, hey, let's stand in line so somebody else doesn't have to, but the parents and children, the fathers and sons, they were out there together as a bonding event in kind of a nerdy way. We're going to set up our chairs and bring our blankets and some snacks, and we're going to stay out here and wait for the iPhone together. And I found that very touching, again, in an only Silicon Valley kind of way.
Now, did you cover it as a reporter?
Yes.
Okay. So you that's one of those stories where it's interesting in itself, but as a journalist, it is a killer story.
Yeah, it is. And it got to be a regular thing where I knew which store Steve Wozniak was going to go to.
Yeah, I remember Woz getting interviewed. Yeah.
Right. I mean, God bless Woz. He's rich. He's the co-founder of the company. I'm sure he can call somebody up and have somebody deliver him a phone. He would stand in line for the phones and for the iPads. And it became, he'd sign people's phones and iPads. He'd hang out because that's what he loved to do, was talk about the product and talk about the company. And so you'd see him, in front of the store on his chair, just sort of holding court. And it was part of the whole wonderfulness of that time.
My appreciation of Steve has grown over the years. I used to think he was kind of silly. I grew up with him, but now I just admire that he does his stuff, that he's managed to stay a normal human being through all of this, and he has that same sincerity that other people have around him. He's not really been affected. I mean, his lifestyle has been affected, but not him. And I really respect that of him.
Yeah.
Okay. Finally. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I agree. Absolutely.
Final item. This is kind of more close to me, I think, than you, but I think have you ever taken your daughters to Great America?
Oh yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I know I'm old enough to remember when they built it. I went on dates there, in high school. I remember my kids went on field trips there, the whole bit. I mean, Great America has been part of our lives here for 40 years, almost 50 years. It was the one thing that was not really Silicon Valley. It was an amusement park. And it was kind of cool to have that here. Well, now it's been, looks like it's going to close in 2033 at the latest, due to a land deal with Bay Area developer Prologis. Now, I can see this turning into another, office center, mixed use or something like that, but it won't be. It'll be just like everywhere else. It's like Silicon Valley is losing another thing that was fun and different and for kids. And we'll never get it back. That land will never be converted back into something interesting. It's kind of sad, I have to say.
I agree. I mean, I was a kid up in Oakland in the North Bay, and Great America was still a destination. And one thing I found in the ensuing years, as Silicon Valley became, the economic growth engine for the entire world, is unlike, say, San Francisco or North, the culture really took a long time to get going in Silicon Valley, because the emphasis was always on business. And I get it. You had these young people starting companies, and, Ampex begat Intel, begat, Google and Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. But to lose a part of the culture, I think, is a big step backward for Silicon Valley, it's always been fighting, say, San Francisco for, are our restaurants good enough? Do we have enough culture? Is there a way to see the ballet and to see plays and musicals and things like that, and concerts? And it's always been, a very distant second to San Francisco when it comes to that stuff. And to lose a great destination, an amusement park, I think is a killer. It's really bad news. Again, as a young person who lived up north, it was a destination to come down here. And again, why would you do that now unless and until you get that tech job?
And it's making the Valley more homogeneous than ever. That disturbs me. We're becoming a one-trick pony in every way, even culturally.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, well, on that sad note, bye-bye, Great America. That's it for now, folks. You can find us on the Silicon Valley Business Journal homepage, as well as on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, LinkedIn, and check out our YouTube page. Have a great 4th of July weekend. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.